In this video, I'm going to talk about something different, my personal experience of domestic abuse, why this is more common than many people think, and how to get help if you find yourself either in a situation where you're being abused or are suffering from the after effects of an abusive relationship. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe to my content if you enjoy this video, as one of my favorite topics, call it passion if you like, is entrepreneurial dating and relationships. Now, abusive relationships is of course an issue that can affect anyone. You do not have to be an entrepreneur or in a relationship with an entrepreneur to suffer this pain. However, I believe entrepreneurs are especially vulnerable to abuse for two reasons. First, and this also goes for corporate high flyers, of which I was one, your time, energy and focus is often full on into your business or career. You're pedaling hard every single day to make things happen, and for this reason you may simply not have the reflective bandwidth to realize what is actually happening to you. One male CEO I personally worked with, and who ran an $8 million company and lived in a $2 million house, had a wife who controlled all their finances and left a measly sum in the jar on the living room fireplace as his spending money every week. She used to kick him in the head when he was driving in front of his children too. Another I knew had a wife who stopped all work in the house and with the children the second he came home from work, and insisted he did bath time, bedtime and cook the evening meal because she was exhausted from looking after the kids all day. She also went out shopping and partying every single weekend with her friends, leaving him without the opportunity to take care of his health and well-being, or pursue meaningful hobbies, or even have a bit of man-to-man downtime with friends after a really tough week at the helm of his company. If you're in a startup situation or your business is struggling, you may expect support from your partner. This can be the trigger of some serious abuse to occur, because when selfish people feel they are having to compromise some aspect of their lifestyle to support another's goals and dreams, they don't like it. You may find, for example, someone who supported you when the going was good becomes mean, spiteful and judgmental when the money dries up. Of course, a lack of money puts all relationships under strain, and conflict, distance and disappointment can be natural consequences of this. But abuse is a consistent pattern of inflicting pain and suffering on another, and make no mistake, in your heart you will know if you're with an outright abuser or just somebody who no longer feels aligned with you. There's a huge difference. Let's talk about women now. Women are 3 times less likely on the whole to run businesses, and they occupy only 20% of board seats globally. So when they do, they often find themselves in the minority and surrounded by men. This means they're even less likely to have female support, and while it's always lonely at the top, it can be even lonelier for women. Of course, men are just as likely as women to be exploitative and manipulative. It's very common for them to look for high-flying women to bankroll their lazy lifestyle. Busy women, especially if they're single parents as I was, lack time to look for love, and through loneliness they can be vulnerable to love bombing and miss the signs they're becoming a mark or target for someone toxic. Also, because high-flying women are smart as well as powerful, one of the best ways to maintain a one-way exchange of value is through abuse. So when those bad guys move in on your life, they'll ensure they maintain a one-up position through practicing many of the tactics I'm going to look at in this video. Before we go any further, I also wanted to say that I am not a qualified psychologist or mental health practitioner. The views expressed in this video are purely my own and do not constitute professional advice. If, however, this video strongly resonates with you and you are an entrepreneur who wants to only surround yourself by those who lift you higher, ask about my elite one-to-one coaching, as this is something I love to help people with. The power of connection is the anti-abuse mechanism, and here's why. Connection is strength, and when abuse happens there is a triple bond that is broken, which is firstly our own connection to and confidence in ourselves. Secondly, the connection we have to others weakens, because abuse cannot take place when we have a really solid circle of immediate support around us, because that same circle will just come along and lift us right out of that miserable situation, shutting the door firmly in our abuser's face. Thirdly, the connection to many gets lost, and that is our rightful place in the wider communities we inhabit. When we're struggling with abuse, we lose our will to show up with strength and power. We become like a shadow of our former selves, which impacts our business or career performance, as well as many other areas of our life. So what we're going to look at next is how and why abuse happens, what abuse actually looks like, how to get help if you're experiencing abuse, and why I truly believe I will never ever be a victim of abuse again. My goal in this video is to help people through this who may be questioning whether what they are experiencing is actually abuse, as well as those who are crystal clear that they are or have been in an abusive relationship and who are looking for some identification, validation, and maybe a way out of their suffering. Now, as I've already said, it's important to remember that all of us are capable of behaving badly at times, and that isn't abuse unless it's a consistent, predictable pattern linked to power and what's called coercive, in other words, forced control of another. So bear this in mind. Survivors of domestic abuse often hide away because they feel marginalised, judged, and ashamed. All around you, every day, there are people going about their daily business who are having a horrible time at the hands of their partner, walking on eggshells, waiting in fear for the next onslaught and being stolen from and ripped off in every way imaginable. If that's you, you're not alone. There are also many people, including me, who will believe your story without placing any blame or judgment on you because they've gone through or seen something similar and they know the reality of abuse. It's not 6 of one, half a dozen of another, as people often say out of ignorance. In abusive relationships, it goes way beyond an unhealthy dynamic. There really are perpetrators and victims, and by the end of this video, you'll be a lot clearer about who and what these look like. If you're currently in an abusive relationship and need help to understand what's actually going on rather than what your abuser is telling you about yourself, this video will hopefully encourage you to seek help or just leave. If it also helps you own and express your history, well, that's the best way to combat toxic shame, the deep and powerful shame others carry, and seek to transfer to you by their own shameful actions. And this doesn't mean you need to be perfect, far from it. Being human, I'm also very imperfect, of course, but I did not deserve or invite the way I was treated at times by my abuser. It was purely his stuff. You may have behaved badly at times because being abused brings out the worst in many people. Maybe there were aspects of your own behaviour that could also be called abusive. However, when you find yourself in a better place and see things more clearly, you will often realise that the intolerable situation you were in led to you behaving uncharacteristically and defensively. Personally, I've always been a really caring and kind person with high integrity, and some of the ways I behaved when I was with my abuser was out of character. I was mostly quiet, sad and withdrawn, but occasionally I would also be deceptive and manipulative, which is completely opposite to my usual open and direct communication style. I felt guilty about this at the time, but I later realised that this was in response to my fear of speaking up and saying what I really thought and felt, because this would have unleashed a barrage of rage. I walked on eggshells, and some of the ways this manifested was by being untruthful, because I was telling my abuser what he wanted to hear rather than what was really going on. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so let's start by smashing 5 myths around domestic abuse. First, that a lack of physical violence means abuse isn't going on. My heart goes out to anyone who has been in a physically violent relationship, as it must be terrifying and dangerous. However, that was not my experience. Emotional abuse can also be extremely traumatic and distressing. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me is a terrible saying. Because words can and do hurt, and the way they're delivered can hurt too. So let's stop pretending that any form of emotional abuse is justified. It really isn't. Second, that men do not suffer abuse. Men as well as women experience abuse, as the only requirement is to be in a relationship with a mentally unstable individual. We know, however, from statistics that men are overwhelmingly the perpetrators in physically violent relationships. However, it's been estimated that 1 in 6 men, that's 16%, have experienced partner emotional abuse, with 5.2% being abused by a current partner and 12% by a previous partner. This contrasts with 1 in 3 women, or 35.6%, who have been emotionally abused by a partner, which means that women are roughly twice as likely to experience intimate partner abuse. Personally, I know many men who have suffered abuse from their partners and wives, and I don't want to invalidate their experience. In fact, they need even more help and support in some instances to leave, because it's deeply ingrained in some men to be strong and not to ask for help when they need it, which is also a contributing factor to the higher rates of male depression, suicide and addiction. Third, that abuse is rare. Surveys have shown that 8.9% of men are physically and emotionally abusive, 4.7% are physically abusive only, and 25.8% are emotionally abusive only. That's 1 in 4. And if anyone thinks it can't possibly be true, well, it's because most people feel a lot of shame by allowing themselves to be abused, and it therefore goes underreported. And many perpetrators get away with abuse because they know this. Fourth, that abuse is linked to alcoholism or drug addiction. Although alcoholics certainly can be and often are abusive, not all are. Cruelty and rage can be addictive too. They are what's known as process addictions, behaviours that cause a feel-good rush in certain individuals. Abusers often choose not to modify their behaviour for this reason. They actually get a payoff when they start to abuse in the form of a release from pain and the sense of offloading it onto another. And this, if you like, is their drug of choice. Fifth, that abuse is a lower class thing. A lack of money is of course stressful, and as the divorce statistics show, when this is the case, relationship conflict is much more likely to happen. However, arguments are not the same as abuse. Arguments can have positive outcomes, and there is nothing wrong with expressing emotions like anger, frustration and pain. However, when that is used to cause intentional harm to another, it tips over into abuse. It's really important to remember that, like addiction, abuse can be found in the wealthiest of homes as well as the poorest. Now let's look at the 5 signs of emotional abuse, and I'm focusing on this rather than physical violence as it reflects my own experience. The first sign is drama. By that I mean an unwelcome and intrusive lack of peace. If someone is a constant source of upset in your life, in other words, if their actions are pulling the focus from you fulfilling your purpose and going happily about your life, that's a major red flag. Drama can be anything like someone making a huge deal out of something others would be relaxed and easygoing about, to engineering family, relationship or financial strife, anything to keep you disturbed, off balance and focusing on the more positive and life-affirming things that most people take for granted. Alongside this drama can also come intermittent reinforcement and the kind of gestures you crave, buying you gifts and flowers, offering compliments and deep and heartfelt apologies for their terrible behaviour. By this time your soul is so starved you ignore what you know to be true, that this is just a temporary respite to keep you hooked like the eye of the storm before everything starts up again. The second sign of emotional abuse can be someone seeking to control your time, and this is often linked to the drama because time and drama are very, very closely linked. When you're in a relationship with an abuser, you will find your focus constantly being pulled from things that matter to you. Instead, you will find your time spent serving their needs in some way. Their goal is to ensure you do not have the time or the space to decide what is best for you and act on it, because secretly they believe they're worthless and they fear that once they give you this time and space, you will realize this and leave them. This, of course, can have a hugely detrimental effect on your business or career success. Entrepreneurial or professional high flyers need peace and support to do their best work, and it's hard to do well when there is someone in the background who is doing their best to drag you down. The third sign of emotional abuse is when someone seeks to control your money. An emotional abuser can be financially reckless or chaotic. They may earn at a minimum level and try to extract every last penny from you until you have nothing left, and are in crippling debt that it will take you a lifetime to escape from. Or they may be very controlling around money, and even if they have wealth, they may make sure your access to it is limited, and that every purchasing decision is made by them, leaving you with no financial power or control over your life. The fourth sign of emotional abuse is seeking to destroy the bond you have with people close to you. Abusers will make it difficult and uncomfortable for you to spend time with family and friends. They are often rude and unpleasant to the people you care about, while being very gracious to their own family and friends. Gradually, those people you care about will distance themselves from you as they know you come as a package with someone mean and nasty. This makes the abuser happy. Of course, they would prefer you not to have support around you, as it gives them more power. The fifth sign of an emotional abuser is criticism, insults, and name-calling. Remember, emotional abusers may be very charming to their own family, friends, and colleagues, but behind closed doors, they can be exceptionally nasty to you. They can scream in your face for hours, issue the worst kind of threats they can dream up, and show the kind of behavior that would be extremely shocking for civilized, normal people to witness. Or they can ignore you to the point you feel invisible, starve you of love and affection, and make you feel as interesting and worthwhile as a worm, literally for years on end. This is never about you, although you may be so worn down by the behaviour that's levelled at you that you may believe it's justified. It's important to remember that abusers hate themselves, and their abuse is an attempt to transfer the pain of that to you. Unfortunately, what that means is they get bolder over time and the abuse escalates. So later in this video, we're going to look at how to escape such a relationship, or if you decide you can't at this present time, how to minimize the impact of your abuser's actions on you. Now let's look at a question people often ask me, which is how to spot signs of abuse in others. The truth is, abuse can be hard to detect. Apart from broken legs, black eyes, bruises and so on, obvious physical injury, abuse can be hard to spot. Most physical abusers will cover their tracks, so unless they're really out of control, they'll hurt their victims where it can't be seen. And as we've seen already, emotional abusers can appear charming to the outside world, unless the outside world consists of your support network, in which case they will often be unpleasant and rude. Victims of abuse will put on a brave face, and you'll even see a smiley, happy side to them. And this is usually because they are relieved to be spending time with you instead of their abuser. Also, they may be in denial about how bad the abuse is because it's extremely painful to face up to. With me, for example, I would often tell myself a story which would go something like this. He's having a hard time right now, and things will improve. He's frustrated and upset, and because of his childhood trauma, he struggles to manage his emotions. If I just ride it out, things will improve and we'll get back to that happy place, just like when we first fell in love. Now, what I realized eventually was that the happy place was an act that he was putting on to trap me. So I was in love with the person I thought he was, but really he never was that person. Because he was in so much internal pain, he was not actually capable of love. His talent was to use people instead. How and why I believe this to be true would require a really long explanation and a list of all the books and resources I consume to fully understand my own situation. So it's not one I can go into here, but I'm telling you this to warn you against the magical thinking that so often accompanies a decision to stay and ride things out instead of leaving. If you've been through something similar, victims of abuse may also fear your judgment. So if your relationship with them is a close one, they may not confide in you or tell you the truth. So let's revisit the checklist to identify whether you are in an abusive relationship currently. I invite you to ask yourself, is your partner attempting to control aspects of your life? For example, your money, time, or relationships with others. Do they behave in a way that benefits them while hurting you? Do they frequently criticize or belittle you, or behave as if you're invisible and of no worth? Is their behavior random and unpredictable in a bad way? Obviously, nobody really minds random, unpredictable acts of generosity or kindness. Do they fly into rages, sulk, or give you the silent treatment? This is a big one for men who have been conditioned to expect emotional outbursts in women. Do they also do things that make you see their wonderful side? Remember, this is a tactic to keep you hooked. If any of this resonates, there's something important I want you to know. Abusers are emotionally dysregulated, and they always will be. They are in so much internal pain that they are incapable of truly loving others. Occasionally, they may realize the error of their ways and seek help. Mostly, however, they will just get better at practicing their craft so they can achieve their power-driven payoff. Rather than fixing themselves, they will continue to minimize your achievements, ridicule your dreams, and try to leave you feeling as though everything you care about and stand for is worthless. So your only true goal, if you are in a relationship with an abuser, should be to plan and execute your escape. Personally, I was vulnerable to abuse because I grew up witnessing and experiencing abuse myself. My family was far from normal, and I carried this blueprint into adulthood. I didn't have a supportive family at all. I didn't have parents who were really involved in my life from an early age. And I experienced an awful lot of emotional as well as practical neglect. Because I never experienced the power of unconditional love, I truly believed I had to earn it. And that set me up for some pretty unhealthy relationships, and finally the choice to commit to my abuser, even in the face of evidence that he was not a man who would love me in the way I would have wanted. People abuse or choose abusers like me because they have unhealed trauma. Abusers are often sociopaths who lack conscience, which apparently stands at 4% of the population, and really they are best avoided as they rarely change. Another question that I am often asked is, why don't people leave abusive relationships, and why didn't you as soon as the abuse became obvious? And here are 3 reasons why. The first is economic entrapment. Since money is used as a weapon of control in abusive relationships, the abuser will do things to make it difficult for you to walk away. And this can consist of things like running up debt or transferring their debt to you, controlling access to funds, or out of control spending so you struggle to fund your path to freedom. The second is children, and this is a big one. Men especially are scared to lose their influence and role as a full-time father, and will often put up with ongoing abuse from their partners or wives in order to avoid this. Because they're men, they know that a good stepfather is a rare breed, and they worry that an adult man entering their children's lives as a caregiver puts them at risk of abuse. This is a very real and understandable fear borne out by statistics, and here's the shocking evidence. Child abuse is 40 times more likely when single parents find new partners. When children live in homes with unrelated adults, they are nearly 50 times as likely to die of inflicted injuries as children living with 2 biological parents. Also, 17% of women who had stepfathers in their childhood have been sexually abused by them, compared to only 2% of those with biological fathers. Now, that's not to say that wonderful stepfathers exist, but it is by no means a given. Also, when women behave in an abusive way to their partners, they are sometimes abusive to their children too, and abused men can feel as though they are the only consistent and loving presence in their lives. All of this means a lot of abused men with children are willing to sacrifice their own happiness and well-being to protect them. The third reason people stay in abusive relationships is the trauma bond, and this is an emotional attachment which develops out of a cycle of abuse devaluation and positive reinforcement. Of course, not all abusers will show kindness and care. Some will just be downright nasty always, but mostly they will alternate their awful behavior with behaviors that make you feel as though they do love you underneath it all. Little gestures of kindness, gifts or words of appreciation, a shared joke, or even a humble and sincere apology for the distress they've caused. It's only natural to develop a bond with someone who treats you with kindness. Many abusive relationships begin with generous gestures and declarations of love. Then once the abuser has secured their place in your life, this becomes a bait and switch, with the worst of them appearing far more often than that kind and loving person you thought you knew. When love is only granted inconsistently, unpredictably, and occasionally, it turns into an emotional roller coaster, which in itself gives you a high. Using an analogy, when you've been starving and someone places a feast in front of you, your appreciation of that food will be intense, right? Far more intense than if you've had a fully stocked fridge that you could eat from whenever you felt like it. So with this intermittent reinforcement, you get an unhealthy hit that's similar to the hit your abuser feels when he or she is inflicting their cruelty. Because victims know at some level they're being manipulated, this is also a major cause of shame and one reason why they decide to stay rather than go. I learned from a neuroscientist that when our brains contemplate change, which we humans resist, we have a tendency to minimize the bad and overemphasize the good. The trauma bond leads us to tell ourselves that the good times are balanced out by the bad. However, if you were to track and monitor your day-to-day experience of living with abuse, you would find that the misery and the pain far outweighs the impact of any random acts of kindness and care, and I think it's important to remember that. The final topic we're going to look at in this video is whether you should stay or whether you should go, and if so, what's the best way to do this? A decision to leave an abusive relationship can't be taken lightly when children are involved. Sometimes people will decide to stay for reasons that make a lot of sense to themselves and also others. I know for myself, I decided to stay when I could have left because my children were young and I couldn't face the upheaval for either myself or for them. I managed the abuse, if you could call it that, in private, and like many loving and responsible parents, I tried to shield my children from the impact of that. Was that the right thing to do? I think the answer was yes at that time. Was I also mistaken in thinking that I could shield my children and that they would not be traumatized from the abuse they witnessed and experienced too? Yes, it was wishful thinking for sure, but leaving would have been traumatic too. It was a catch-22 situation, which became clearer and more straightforward over time. I knew that a time would come when I could escape, and although I did love my abuser, or at least the man I believed my abuser to be underneath it all, I knew that if his behaviour didn't change, I was going to be out of there when the time was right. Perhaps you feel the same. The important thing is to prioritise your own well-being and build a circle of support for yourself. Remember to reach out to me if you'd like some one-to-one coaching to achieve this. Okay, so how can you escape from an abusive relationship if this is something you've decided to do? First, get support from people who really understand. I personally love the 12-step mantra, I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I can't cure it. This hands the responsibility for the terrible behaviour of your abuser right back to them and gives you the freedom to make your exit. Remember, you can't fix an abuser. They have to want to fix themselves. And since most of them don't, the best way out often is to leave. By the time you're ready to leave, you will usually be at a very low point. It's common for the abuser to have taken everything they can from you, including your self-worth and respect. You may have no money or be in debt. Your friends and family may have drifted away because your partner has driven a wedge between you. Your first and most important task, therefore, is to get a support team in place, practical as well as emotional. Second, you need money. Fortunately, this was not my issue and it made it easier for me to get away and establish a new life. If I had to go back and I did not have money, I would simply make it my priority to get some by whatever means I could. Third, you need a plan that is smart. In other words, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic and time-bound. Set a date, get the help and ensure you are not alone. If you are an entrepreneur or professional high flyer who is currently experiencing the issues I talk about in this video, or if you have experienced them in the past, I hope this has been helpful to you. Keep coming back for more. Like, subscribe to my channel and remember to reach out if you'd like a confidential one-to-one chat about how we can work together. Thank you so much for watching.